Right. So we see that the first question is Sartre the Flies was interpreted as a text favoring the resistance as well as the Nazi occupiers in France. How do you account for such diverse interpretations? Now, on this very issue, there is a paper which I have sent to you, which discusses why the same plot, the play, could be interpreted in two ways. Now, in as far as Orestes is a Nietzschean hero or a Übermensch or Overman, he kills the oppressors and he brings political stability in the kingdom. So that much of that ideological stance would be accepted by the Nazis, who also believed that a strong hero, a Nietzschean hero, brings some kind of deliverance to the people. But what will the resistance see? The resistance will see that there are some suggestions in the play of Orestes representing a dignity for man, a dignity which can be found in human freedom and not being a slave to another person. The resistance will make much of this and will interpret Orestes' actions as that of a person who protects this dignity of every ordinary being through his actions. Sartre does not make this aspect of Orestes, the aspect of rebellion, the rebellious aspect, or the political ideology as bringing deliverance to people as a revolutionary. Sartre does not describe this in any detail so that the Nazis can ignore whatever little or some weak references to dignity is there. On the other hand, the Nietzschean hero, the Übermensch that Sartre creates in Orestes, that the qualities of that Übermensch, his ruthlessness, his determination, all these are sketched very lightly so that the resistance can ignore them and ignore Orestes as a Nietzschean hero, like any fascist hero. Okay. So Sartre achieves this balance by working through suggestions, hints, and indirectness, not explaining much, not interpreting much, Orestes' purpose, or even not putting the whole action in a contemporary context, but setting it in a Greek context. And some people might simply believe that Sartre's play is a refashioning of the Greek play of the famous Orestian theme and has nothing to do with contemporary politics. So that is also possible. The next question, comment on Sartre's use of mythology, would you call it traditional? Now, there is no doubt that Sartre uses the theme of Orestian mythology, taking it from Greek mythology. This theme can be found in Homer, in Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles. So every Greek writer, renowned writer, has written on this theme. But their treatment of the myth is different one from the other. How these authors treat the same Greek myth differently, for that I have given you a paper where you can see the difference in the treatment of Homer, Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles, and such. So that will help you. Would you call it traditional? We cannot call it traditional because Sartre uses the matrix of myth to suggest not only a contemporary political situation but also a philosophical point of view. So the standpoint taken by existentialism vis-a-vis any oppression in modern times. This standpoint is very curious because on the one hand existentialism believes in complete freedom and detachment, and therefore insofar as it believes in nihilism, it does not believe in ethics. It does not believe in God. Therefore, it does not believe in right and wrong, good and evil. So it borrows much from Nietzsche. Nietzsche is beyond good and evil, or thus speaks Zarathustra. In many writings, Nietzsche expressed this point of view, where one cannot think in terms of conventional ethics. But at the same time, existentialism does not stand for any unethical action. So this may appear to be contradictory, but it is not. Because existentialism is against all oppression. So any oppression or tyranny, enslavement of people is opposed by existentialism because that is opposed to freedom. So if freedom must be achieved by one, then it must be achieved by all. Otherwise, there cannot be freedom in the full sense of the term. And Sartre defines this freedom as freedom of choice. So every person has the choice, has the opportunity to choose whether he will act for freedom or he will act for oppression. That makes existentialism philosophy different from nihilism. Why are there two protagonists in the plays? Discuss their dramatic significance. So, Orestes and Electra are the two protagonists. Their attitude towards the same question of revenge, of delivering Argos from the oppression of Eurystheus, their attitude is different. So Sartre presents them as foils to each other. At the beginning we see that Orestes does not have any purpose in life, whereas Electra's whole life revolves around the idea of her revenge. She is furious against Eurystheus and also Clytemnestra because of planning and executing the murder of her father, Agamemnon. Orestes does not have any memory, and therefore he does not feel the same, compulsion or the desire for revenge against anybody. So if we compare their attitudes, then we see that one is moved by the idea of personal revenge and the other is moved by an idea of looking for a purpose in life, which one may call a philosophical quest. So Orestes is looking for a purpose, he is looking for attachment. Ironically, in this search for attachment, ultimately he becomes detached. So he wants to feel that he belongs to the city of Argos, that their memory would be his memory, their suffering would be his suffering, and he wants to deliver them from this suffering. So he wants to develop this bond with his sister Electra, so that he feels similar to her, and together they can accomplish something. Now we see that initially Orestes is against the idea of acting, taking up arms against Eurystheus and Clytemnestra. But then this person who was so detached, he feels that if he has to acquire some purpose, then he can acquire this purpose not through personal revenge but by a public act. That is, if he acts on behalf of others, if he acts for the people of Argos, if he kills Eurystheus and Clytemnestra, then the people of Argos would be free of their anguish, suffering, sense of guilt and all that. So we have to see this distinction between private revenge and public revenge or public act. Orestes did not have any axe to grind here. He was not one of them. So he could just have left them. But he decides to commit himself to their cause. Therefore, through Orestes, Sartre is representing the idea of a revolutionary who commits himself to a cause of fight against oppression. And this commitment comes entirely out of volition, voluntarily. So there must not be any compulsion, because then it is not a commitment. Then we see that there is this movement in Orestes from total detachment to attachment to the people of Argos in a very specialized sense. He is not really attached. Now when, as long as he was kind of not fully aware of his freedom, Zeus made Zeus took every opportunity, he made every attempt of persuading Orestes that the religion of Zeus, which was maintained by Theseus, who made the people of Argos suffer from a sense of guilt and repentance, that should be followed, and Orestes should not think of disturbing that plan. So Zeus had been following Orestes and the tutor and wanted to know what was in Orestes' mind. Now we see that Orestes rejects these proposals of Zeus. He does not accept and he does not accept Zeus's proposal, and he decides that he will deliver the people of Argos by killing Zeus and Latinus. This is a very difficult decision because it involves matricide, and since Orestes did not have any memory of his father, therefore it is not propelled by any private revenge, but solely by his sense of responsibility toward the people of Argos. So by opposing Zeus, he asserted his freedom, and then at a moment of revelation he says that freedom crashed upon me. I suddenly realized that I am free, and that also made me realize that I was alone in this freedom and nothing mattered to me, Zeus or any religion or anything. So this is the course of Orestes' evolution. Then he delivers the people of Argos, making them free from their sense of guilt. On one hand, Sartre here is critical of Christianity for its attempt to give people a sense of guilt and the idea of sin and atonement. On the other hand, he is presenting through Orestes a hero who can fight oppression and commit himself fully to a cause. Therefore, according to existential definition of freedom, one who makes a free choice and chooses to fight for freedom rather than oppression. In contrast to this course of evolution of Orestes' character, Electra's character undergoes an opposite evolution in an opposite direction. Electra initially, who was a firebrand revolutionary, you may say, in the sense that she was the only person who opposed Eurystheus, who disobeyed him in public and posed a threat to him. She nurtured this idea of revenge, and she wanted to kill Eurystheus. Now, as the real possibility of the murder takes shape by the advent of Orestes, Electra finds it that the secret dream of revenge and the actual act of revenge, the bloody act of killing somebody, these two are quite different. And she cannot commit herself to this act of revenge in spite of her wish or promptings by Orestes. So when Orestes goes to kill Eurystheus and Clytemnestra, he does not get the full support of Electra. Thus we see this change in Electra. A person who has private cause cannot become a true revolutionary. A revolutionary must feel a public cause. So one who has personal access to crime, they cannot become revolutionaries. So Electra shows a failure of will. When the necessity of application of will arrives at that moment, her will fails and she cannot join hands with Orestes. On the other hand, she, because of her failure and her realization that she is weak, she lacks the strength or the power of will. So she becomes more and more dependent upon religion, upon ideology, and joins hands with Zeus. So there is the opposite force in the development or evolution of a character. And these two forces would not be represented if there were not two protagonists. So I suppose their dramatic significance is to represent the question of attainment of will and purpose and execution of that will vis-a-vis lack of will and failure of execution. So these could be the two attitudes, or two attitudes towards revolution. So if we read the play as a political metaphor, then Electra would be a failed revolutionary and Orestes would be a revolutionary who could actually commit to the cause. And if we read the play as an existential play, then we will say that Orestes represents the attainment of freedom through exercise of choice, whereas Electra represents the failure of being herself, realizing her true self, and being led by ideology rather than by her own will. What is the role of Zeus in the flies? Discuss it with reference to the flies in the play. Zeus represents in this play the authority, the power, the ideology which holds people in thrall, which enslaves them. Zeus and Eurystheus together stand for the establishment, the power, the political power and authority, and together they are like the state and the church who brainwash the people and keep them perpetually enslaved. And we see that Zeus acts hand in gloves with Eurystheus and even says that we are very similar, we are kings, and Zeus, his whole attitude towards Orestes makes it clear that he also knows that at one point this authority of any tyrannical regime will be questioned by somebody. So if anybody realizes that he is not a slave, if anybody refuses to be brainwashed, then that person will start asking questions, and the right of the powers being in control or oppressing others. We see that Zeus even attempts to influence Orestes by showing him his miraculous power as the king of all the universe, the entire cosmos. But that miracle doesn't work on Orestes, who is confident about his freedom. So Zeus can be interpreted in political terms as religion, which is often hand in gloves with political power and works as a mask or as Karl Marx said, an opium of the people. It is something which keeps people hypnotized, forever blinded by false ideology. Should we term the flies as Nietzschean or an existential play? Should we term it as a Nietzschean play or an existential play? Now, this question is kind of trick because existential philosophy is founded upon nihilism, Nietzschean nihilism, and therefore to a large extent the play, just a second, I will not display. So it is both a Nietzschean play because the foundation is that of nihilism, which takes a point of view beyond conventional ethics, beyond good and evil. At the same time, it is an existential play as it speaks of making an existential choice. That is, it believes in the assertion of human freedom, that man has the freedom over choice. Okay. So there is another paper which will help you in understanding Nietzschean nihilism and Sartre's existential nihilism and how far they match and where they differ. Discuss Orestes as a Nietzschean hero in the flies. So this would be easy. Nietzschean hero is the idea of Übermensch, which Nietzsche presents in his writings, and Übermensch overcomes the limitations of common men and can therefore assert his will to power. That is another thing which Nietzsche theorizes about, the will to power, and he can therefore become the true leader. So Orestes can be seen as a Nietzschean hero, but this makes this question kind of only, this question leads to only a partial analysis of Orestes as a hero. It neglects the other part of Orestes, the other quality of Orestes as an existential hero. The murder of Eurystheus and Clytemnestra is only an excuse for unfolding the existential thought of Sartre in the flies. It is a very simple question where you were supposed to write about Sartre's existential ideas which have been represented in this play, the idea of freedom, the idea of fighting against oppression and rejection of religion, and the consequent existential anguish of loneliness or alienation. So all these are represented in this play. Discuss the significance of the Furies in Sartre's play The Flies. How are they treated differently in Sartre from Greek plays? So, in Greek plays, the Furies are supernatural agents. They are agents of punishment, and in Sartre's play we see that the Furies are made servants of Zeus, and they can punish people because the people believe in religion, believe in ideology, and they suffer from a sense of guilt. So I suppose in Sartre's play the Furies are not to be read literally. the Furies are manifestation of the inner sufferings of any person who does not have the realization of freedom. So anybody who is like a slave, who is not an agent, who does not feel agency, does not feel freedom, would be punished as if the Furies, like the Furies punish the guilty in such way. So the Furies are a kind of a reification of the inner anguish and suffering of people who are not free. How does Electra change from a revengeful character to one who suffers from remorse in the end? So that question has already been discussed. Discuss the significance of the contrast between Sartre's depiction of Electra and Orestes. This is another way of presenting the question why there are two protagonists. Comment on Sartre's success in dramatizing the thought of existential philosophy. That is also a repetition of the earlier question. Should we term the prize as Nietzschean or an existential? So basically I have discussed the questions. Now I will very briefly look at some of the critical material. Alright, can you see it? This is written by Alan Stockel. What the Nazis saw, Les Mouches in occupied Paris, published in 2003. So this gives you how the same play, Les Mouches or the Flies, was read differently by the Nazi officers and the resistance in France. How this play could get the approval of the German censor and so on. As one German critic writing for the Paris German language newspaper distributed to the occupying soldiers actually saw in Les Mouches a celebration of a Nietzschean Nazi supernarrative. Sartre writes, I would say that my hero commits seemingly the most inhuman infamy. His gesture is that of a dispenser of justice, since it is to avenge his father the king, murdered by a usurper, that he kills the latter. But he extends the punishment to his own mother, the queen, whom he also sacrifices. So there is this criminality in Orestes that he also kills his mother, Clytemnestra, even though it was not perhaps strictly required. But many Greek plays describe Orestes killing Clytemnestra. So Sartre could excuse himself by saying that even in Greek plays we see this. Through this gesture, now the point here is that if Orestes takes recourse to such a cruel act, then the Nazis will feel that yes, this is their hero. Okay. Through this gesture, which one cannot isolate from the reactions to it, he re-establishes the harmony of a rhythm that goes beyond in its scope the notion of good and evil. So this Orestes going beyond good and evil, this is a Nietzschean position. But his act will remain sterile if it is not total and definitive, if it must, for example, lead to remorse, a feeling that is only a turning backwards, since it is the equivalent of a link to the past. So Orestes must not feel remorse, otherwise his act of killing will come to nothing, he will not get his freedom. This is what Sartre writes. These words of Sartre were published in this journal. This was an interview published under the byline of Yvonne Novi, appeared in Commedia in 1943. So this quotation is from Sartre, Sartre's interview which was published in the French journal Commedia in 1943. So Sartre here talks about the Nietzschean character of Orestes in his play, who goes beyond good and evil, which is a nihilistic point of view. In fact, this abstract individualized liberty has bothered critics on both right and left. Ingrid Galster cites Dr. Albert Boucher, who in the occupation paper Parisian Zeitung puzzles over Sartre's conception of freedom, while providing the obvious Nazi reading of Orestes, who is a dramatized Nietzsche. Dr. Boucher nevertheless is nonplussed. He can't imagine why God is presented as appreciating order and having created man, giving him a free will, while nevertheless making man's freedom, as evidently Orestes, a source of difficulty for everyone concerned. This is a Dr. Boucher puts it, bizarre theology. He concludes that if only Orestes is liberated by that, then no one is liberated. So, for the Nazi readers, it was not possible to understand the existential nature of the character Orestes. Dr. Boucher was a Nazi in 1943. Therefore, he did not understand Sartre. Electra's remorse or memory is her weakness. Conversely, the affirmation of the crime in dread is purely in the present without memory. This is strength, nobility, but also, of course, toughness. Orestes is no soft sister. He commits his crime, the most horrible, matricide, affirms it, forgets its monstrosity, carries it, ultimately secretly, for who else could understand. So, Electra has remorse, repentance, Orestes has none. The significance of this is that people reading inattentively, the censors, easily bold collaborationist critics, puzzled Nazis, would have read or seen the play and not even noticed its putative message, because for them it would blend effortlessly into the collaborationist propaganda they produced and consumed every day. So the Nazis could not read all the meaning of the message. The strength of the play is that it presents two sets of complementary blind spots for two different audiences. Fascists could see the play ignore a vaguely provocative reference to dignity, the dignity of being a magnificent criminal, and see, no matter how lackadaisically, an affirmation of individual violence that transcends common bourgeois morality. Therefore, the fascists would agree with this. Resistance partisans, on the other hand, could ignore those elements and fasten on the few hints within the play, again dignity, the killing of Aegisthus as a house cleaning by which the fascists are apparently eliminated, freedom as a personal benefit to be derived through democracy, and so on. But the resistance would be able to read this message.